Corn is wind pollinated, so when you have a small corn patch like I do, sometimes you need to help a little bit with that pollination. You can do this with a bag over the tassels, shake it up, collect some of the pollen, and drop it onto the silks. You can cut some of the tassels off and shake it over the silks. Personally, I just like to give it a little bit of a shake to drop some of the pollen off, depending on which way the wind's blowing, and help it along that way. When you do hand pollinate your corn, you want to do it early in the morning. That's when they're going to be releasing their pollen. Occasionally they'll do a second one later in the day, but that is when you'll get the best results. Not sure if you can see on video, but there's just kind of a fine dust cloud coming off of these, and you can kind of aim that dust cloud depending on the wind. To drop down into these silks. Now, in order to get an ear of corn, every single silk needs to be pollinated. Pollen needs to touch every single one of these hairs, and you can see once it has been pollinated, they start to turn kind of brown. When your corn is fully pollinated, it won't be so much of this reddish brown color, but it will just shrivel up and be brown like you would see in the store. If you have a large patch of corn, you really don't need to do anything to hand pollinate. The wind will be more successful. This is just for those smaller beds where you have 20, 25 or less stalks. Now with a small bed, if you get a strong wind, it could actually just blow that pollen right past the bed and never actually land on any of your corn. With big fields, that's not an issue because there's plenty of corn for that pollen that blew past that first section to get to later. If you notice you have a lack of pollinators in your garden, you may want to hand pollinate your tomatoes. I don't particularly have that issue, so I'm not out here having to hand pollinate. The bees are very successful at doing it for me. But if you're in an area where you're just not seeing that many bees, or it's still a little early in the season and you need to help your tomatoes along, you can go up to the flowers and do a few different things. You can just kind of shake them with your finger, move the branch around. Basically, the pollen is up here in the flower and needs to drop down onto the stamen, this little point here, in order to pollinate your tomato and get a fruit. Now, they do this particularly well with the buzzing of a bumblebee, the vibration that a bumblebee causes. You can also replicate this a little bit better than just, shaking it around by using an electric toothbrush. Put an electric toothbrush right about there and vibrate the flower, and it'll help drop the pollen down onto the stamen. Eggplant pollination is very, very similar to tomato pollination. You just have to kind of shake the flower a little bit because the pollen is held within the flower and you just need it to get dropped down onto the stamen there. But you only really need to do this on female flowers. I do not have any female flowers at the moment. For female flowers, you'll notice that this right here is a lot thicker, whereas these just kind of have a skinny little stalk behind the flower. It's kind of like squash, where you'll see a swelling. That's the mini fruit behind the flower. And I hope those little tips help you get a better yield in your summer garden. Until next time, happy gardening. Bye.